On the website, you can go and download files and print them yourselves or have them made yourselves. Why? Because of visuals. I walked into an Acts 2 church 3 weeks ago in Brookhaven, Mississippi. They'd been through the Acts 2 journey. And when I walked in, hanging from the ceiling was their 3 components of their vision statement. Walking into the sanctuary, big banners like this on the wall with their values. And we'll talk about values tomorrow and how important they are and how you articulate them and how you build them, how you assign them and how you advertise them. It's about helping people stay on point. I was able to tour OtterBox, the company OtterBox, up in Fort Collins, Colorado. They are so insistent that their values are going to be drilled in and lived. They have their values printed on a little card with every value stated. On the back side of that card, they have some lines that you can say, I saw Tommy Moore fulfilling or living or demonstrating value number 4. And I was impressed, or I was received, or I observed. It was, and that card gets dropped in a box after you've had all 6 of their values identified in your life by somebody. Then every quarter they have a drawing, and they give huge gifts if you win. I mean, like a mountain bike, I saw one. I mean, some stuff that's people, I mean, big time stuff. And then the next quarter they do the same thing. They are just so dedicated to the values that they never let them slide. They never let them slide. They tie everything to the value. They tie everything to vision. I'm just telling you, we are not that intentional. Even in our preaching, we'll talk about a preaching calendar. We're not trying to tell you or tell anybody what they should preach. We're just going to say, if this is important, you ought to dedicate some pulpit time to these subjects. But we have pastors all the time that love to preach about their pet subject. And even if you are saying, well, I'm an expository, I'm going to do an exegetical study, and I'm going to preach with Scripture, we got a guy over here that does that very well. His name is John Lindell. James River. He just celebrated preaching through the whole New Testament. And it took him 25 years. Now that is commendable. But a person who's trying to take a journey with the congregation probably will not play it out 25 years. 25-year plans are not that helpful today. Most people don't stay around that long. The vision statement should be clearly understood by all who hear it and provide direction for the future. We're going to talk about a strategic plan. We're answering these 10 questions. But we're going to gather everything around this template, these 5. So as we're casting vision, as we're building, in a minute, or in this session this afternoon, when I get done with mine, Ron will come back and we'll actually craft a vision statement the way we teach it. Is this the only way? No. Wisdom's not going to pass from the face of the earth when we die. Say that again. we have developed a plan. As you heard Ron, we have a plan. If you got a better plan, great. If you don't have a plan, we like ours better. These 5 activities constitute the business or the purpose of the church. It's what a biblically functioning community looks like. It's what the church does. What? Evangelism, discipleship, gift-oriented ministry, fellowship, and worship. Go, connect, grow, serve, worship. I say there's 2 words that I think are important that most people resist. I say they're not words to resist. Here's the 2 words: repetitive and redundant. Because when you think everybody knows, you're wrong. When you think nobody knows, you're wrong. When 50% of the high school seniors, according to Barna, think that Sodom and Gomorrah were husband and wife, we're living in a post-Christian. And so if our stats are right, and I have stats from Generis Group that say 15 years ago, 40% of the people attended church 4 times a month. They have a church of 1,000 scenario. 40% attended 3 times a month. That's 80% came 3 or 4 times a month. 15 years later, 40% come 1 time a month. 30% come 2 times a month. The typical average attendance of a church of 1,000 15 years ago, with the frequency attendance they laid out, averages 755. That's how many seats are filled. 15 years later, that same church, with the infrequency of attendance of today's culture, that same church averages 488. So when you walk into a church building, and the building that used to be 3/4 full now is 1/2 full, you think you're losing people. You have to have the same energy, the same team, the same everything, and yet you're ministering. You're not preaching to a pool. You're preaching to a stream. And they're passing by so fast. So if you tell them about this one Sunday and think you've conquered everything, if you take a missions faith promise one Sunday a year, think about it. How many people you haven't touched. Repetitive and redundant. So here's what we're going to do. We're continually asking people to do little, is this a scientific survey? No. Is it an activity? Yes. What is it about? Getting people engaged. And it does show some element. So when we're talking about these 5 functions, these 5 activities, the first thing we want to make sure they understand, this is not a program. It's not a program. It's a lifestyle. Programs are something that you can start and stop. Lifestyle, how you do life, church, is continuing. Somebody asked me, said, what do we do after we go through Acts 2? What's next? What's the next program is what they were asking. I said, I don't want to be a smart aleck, but I am. Well, what are you going to do next? What are you going to build next? I said, when they write a new Bible, we'll do another one. But right now, we got the instruction. Now, can we make it better? Yes. Are we going to add some things to it? Yes. Are we going to talk about other avenues? Yes. Now, how are you going to replace evangelism? So, what we do, we have a little, this is what happens, this is what we call table talk. So I'm going to ask you to take a moment and you're going to take this little survey. And you'll take all 5 functions. This one's on worship. Our worship is spirit empowered and reflects a sense of reverence for God and His holiness. Not at all, they put. So you put a 1. You number it based upon where it is on the Likert scale. When you get through, you divide that total by 3 and that'll give you the average. Go through each one and you can create your averages. Use your own church that you attend as the church that you're evaluating. Okay? So take a few moments and go through these little exercise surveys.
He says worship. He's not talking about the music. He's talking about the whole thing, right?
Yeah. According to his example, we actually add the numbers up. So what he said was add them and divide by 3.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
It looks like in that example up there, you add them up.
Yeah. Maybe it's you divide by 3.
Aha.
Some of it's a little confusing.
Like what?
Like our church expresses the importance of bringing individuals to maturity. So, leadership, yeah. You, yeah. I mean, in preaching, yeah. But our church, no, not so much.
Say you great message, powerful.
Have to be careful and read the questions.
Yeah.
Oh, you mean just don't connect?
That
phone is doing whatever, don't connect,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
distracted, or diverted.
Yeah,
I think so. I think how we overcome that.
That's hard. I mean,
What this is for is for us
Because
to
I see the same service, one
where we
person
need to make improvements.
gets this,
Sure.
and it's like, wow. And the other
It's not
person,
like it's. This isn't
right.
saying that.
And then the next
stuff-
day, 2 days later, nobody knows what it was usually, right?
Like with the first
I
three,
think that's. I think that's
talking about our
happens all the
worship.
time.
Yeah.
I think sometimes you just get to this place where you're like
overall,
trying to connect.
right.
Of course, we know that these people are so distracted by so
But
many other things.
do the
That's
people
part of the reason why I even
Right.
I'm
Not
recording all this is
necessarily.
because I know I did it. I
Is it
went
what's
to
being
thing one
presented,
time
or
before
is
and
it how it's
recorded
being
and
received?
listened to the speaker.
Or
And
is
then
it a
later on listen to
combination
it.
of
Well,
it
I
all?
didn't hear any of that. I missed this.
so we do that ourselves.
So there's
I
so
have a
much
bad habit of
distraction,
overthinking questions.
and I think that's part of it. What I don't get is
Stop it.
what I get frustrated with probably
Oh, there's two
is
more.
the sense of just not just
I don't know if we're supposed to keep
having.
going.
There's old saying, the lights are on, nobody's home. There's just a sense of when you're after a service or after a ministry and having this conversation, there's just no sense. There's a sense of they just miss totally, maybe even what you were saying. Now, I know we've all had people say, "Oh, that was just for me," and I've had people come to me and say, "Man, I like your sermon. It was on whatever," and I didn't even preach on that, right? And they just start pulling what they get out of it. So it is. I see that. I see where there's, I think, so much distraction in the, I find myself even at times. If I'm that way, I find myself even at times picking my phone up, seeing what's going on, putting it down in a meeting like this. So in our church services, there's so much. Not just that. There's so many other things that get our attention.
I don't know how much more
And
can
we
do on
we
this.
know the work that we put into it.
Well, I
To
mean,
prepare
we
the
do
word
training.
and preach, and we pray that it finds fertile
We
soil.
got everything there.
And then we feel the value
But
that we're
everything
offering.
else is like.
We feel
all
like
can
we're-
be-
And then,
But sometimes
then
only
what just
because
really, just like if we had
we
something
don't.
on finance.
I mean, we hold like we're doing
And that's
leadership
something I'm
training
really
now.
just got natural
We're
at.
not
Then I have
equipped
somebody
to hold
when we're
training
done 3
all
weeks
the
later.
time. You know what I mean?
I got you.
We have it available, but we don't hold classes all the time. There's just not enough people to do it right.
Right?
This is to share.
Forget
that.
it.
Forget it. Because you've tried.
Right.
It's been offered.
I focused on training.
What always bothers me is I have people directly, absolutely, y'all know, this is old pastor stuff. I've had people at my office, I tell them exactly, this is what you need to do. That's my counsel. And then they go and do the exact opposite.
Yeah.
And that's just old pastor stuff.
So,
In the pulpit, too, people who preach.
how many people you're looking at all five now, you've got your average score. How many people found that worship was the highest of the five in the church you analyzed? Raise your hand. Worship. How many found that in the church you analyzed, that discipleship was the highest? How many found that fellowship or connect was the highest? How many found that evangelism was the highest? How many found that volunteerism or service or gift-oriented ministry was the highest? So you're normal. I mean, actually, that's exactly, I mean, we could have told you the results before you took the little survey. Usually, worship and fellowship, relationships, however you want to, are the highest, and evangelism and discipleship are the lowest. So, I always ask, or tend to ask, so what's the highest priority in the preaching scale? It's always evangelism. We get that a lot. So, let me give you my philosophy. I don't even know if everybody on my team agrees with this. I'm not asking them, but I don't think that over-assessing is all that important. There's a lot deeper assessments we could do. I mean, you can go and assess the board and assess the staff. We're not church consultants. I want you to understand, if you're going to do this with other people, we're not church consultants. By that I mean, we're not analyzing the effectiveness of every church, every group, every staff member. We're not going to tell you who to hire and who to fire and when to do it. That's not our job. In fact, I tell you a lot when I'm speaking to a group of churches and leaders, I'm saying stuff like this. It's your church. We're going to give you tools, principles. We will give you our story, but we can't pull the trigger for you. I don't know you. I don't know your situation. I've never been there. I can't judge the timing sequence. Besides, in today's litigious society, I guarantee you we haven't heard the last yet of lawsuits for wrongful employment or wrongful termination. If I come as an outsider and I say to you, Mark, I think that Susie and Bill are bad staff members. I think they're the weakest link in your chain. I think you should think about replacing them, and you go replace them. And they disagree to the point that they think they got a case, and they make that case. That's not my job. Now, if you're a leader, at some point you will have to let some people go. And you'll have to hire, and I get that. That's not what we're here for. We do that life cycle. We have a survey. We do these kinds of surveys. Why? To help people get conditioned for change. We believe that mental health factors are important to evaluate and recognize. But I used to hear Maxwell teach all the time. You cannot improve probably more than 2 standard deviations on the scale. So if you're a 3, you might can get to a 5 and you're still average. If it's on 1 to 10. But if you're a 7 and you get to a 9, you just increase your leadership capacity to a great extent. Because normally 4s don't lead 8s. 4s lead 3s. So, what happens is we're trying to get them to understand where they are. Now, please don't misunderstand me. I'm not picking on anybody, and I'm not against anybody. But our rule of thumb, the way we operate as a movement, and I would say that most all churches operate kind of like this as movements. We populate our conferences with speakers who typically are wildly successful. They have large churches, or they have this, or they got a big building. I actually heard a guy the other day call somebody else, one of his friends, and said, our friend of ours is building a new building. What's the square footage? He said, why do you want to know? Because he said, I'm getting ready to build one, and I got to build with more square feet in it than he has. So there's something going on out there. When we get through, in fact, we'll do Gary McIntosh's typology of church size in a little while, maybe tomorrow. If you've read Carl Lager's Small Church Essential, the one thing he does about the law of the large number, the idiosyncratic, he doesn't say it exactly this way, the idiosyncratic behavior of a single knucklehead in a small church can wreck your church. Put them in a large church and they don't even make a ripple. So the difference between a church of 200 and 2,000 is enormous. The difference between a church of 2,000 and 20,000, not so much. Because they've already conquered the law of the large number. Right? The point is, smaller churches, like 200 and under, smaller churches don't function the way large churches function. And yet, I fell into the same trap, because I heard John say it too. When our church began to grow, I would come home, I'd go to a conference, I would say, I'm paid to do 4 things. I cast vision. I'm the primary communicator. I teach, mentor, train. I'm responsible for the staff. I steward the money. Then I would stop. Then I would say this. I'm not the primary caregiver. I'm not the primary counselor. And the guy running 27 or 62 or whatever in Buckshot, Arkansas would go home and say, Alton doesn't go to the hospital, so I don't have to. You miss a hospital call in a small town in a small church, they could be 3 cousins removed.
That's right. That's the trouble.
And not having been in your church in years. You miss that hospital call, and you're in trouble.
That's right.
So, I don't know what the answer is. I've all prayed to it, I know. But I wish somehow we could get people relating to people on their level. When I said what I said this morning in my first session about somebody in a small town, a small church, and how that we look down our nose because they can't get a bigger church, I said that one night. I was preaching a district meeting, and I said it. My phone lit up. I couldn't read them. When I got to the first one, after I got away from the church, a lady said, I'm the pastor of a small church. Our whole congregation was in my living room tonight watching you on live stream. And when you said what you said, instantaneously at the same time, we all started crying. Because we realized then somebody knew we existed. Somebody cared about us. So yes, we want to assess them. But I can tell you, they already know something's wrong. All we're trying to do is to get them to just kind of accept it. Accept it. So that's why we do this. We get them there, and we reintroduce hope again. So what we call this is dreamscaping. I dream of a church where if there was no obstacle, and money was not an issue, and personnel was not a problem. If I had, as Ron was talking earlier, I had God's plan, and this was God's church, and He was doing with it what He wanted to, what would it look like? To the best of my ability. So we spend time asking them to actually dream of a church where, and we ask them to take the 5 functions and just dream. Not what is, what could be. If it was perfect and I liked it the way I wanted it to be, what would that look like? And so we ask them, and we give them, here's something else we do, and I have to explain it to you. When I first started, I won't blame it on the other guys, but when I first started teaching this years ago, principles like this, I was much more broad in my scope, less specific in my outcomes, and less intentional about guardrails. I'm going to put it that way. What people had a tendency to do in a meeting where you just spent 1 day or 2 days is they would have a tendency to get off base. And they would get out there so far that when we had to correct them and bring them back when they got ready to build their strategic plan, or they got their feelings hurt. So admittedly, I'm telling you, I don't tell this in cohorts, I'm telling you. Because if you're going to do this, I'm trying to not ask them to copy what I put up there, but knowing that some will. I'm asking them to see where my boundaries are, or where I am saying we want to go. Because I had to pull the boundaries in, the guardrails in, to keep them from being too far out in right field or left field. And it's not just here, it's on a lot of things, and you'll see what I'm talking about as we go along. In a minute, or after the break, Ron will come up and talk about how to craft a vision statement. Well, if you let them loose without some pretty good specific guardrails, no telling what they'll come back with. And then if it's not going to be effective or efficient based upon our experience, then we have to correct them too much. And when we get to Retreat 4, it's not about correction. When we get to Retreat 4, it's about celebration.
Yes.
Because we've got churches, some of them, that don't have much capacity at all from a financial standpoint or personnel. I was in one recently, and this couple came to me. They get real nervous about Retreat 4. And they said, we just don't have the money. We couldn't present a booklet. We couldn't do all that. I said, they were so nervous. I said, listen, stop. There is no pass-fail here. You can't fail. Number 2, if you've got 3 ideas on the backside of a gum wrapper, you're doing better than you were when you got here. Because at that point, we're tired of beating them down. We want them to believe that I can do this. I got hope. I can do this. So that's why we do these dream statements. Now, what they don't know, and I'm going to tell you, what they don't know is that this is an exercise they think is just an exercise. But in Retreat 3, I'm going to pull back and I'm going to pull these dream statements out, and we're going to use them in a way. Because if I told them, some of them, that in Retreat 1 they were going to have to write a 3-year plan, they quit. They quit. They said, we can't do it. But by the time they get there, we've already given them the components of a plan. They just haven't seen us put it together yet. And when we get to Retreat 3, all of this, some of the stuff that seemed a little boring to them, is going to come into focus. And Retreat 3, if you miss Retreat 3 in a cohort, you might as well go home. But we can't help you there. Because retreat 4 means nothing to you if you miss retreat 3. That's why we need you. Once you engage, the reason I say it's not a quick fix and it's not a silver bullet, it's simple, but not simplistic. What do I mean by that? If you don't work the plan won't work. If you drop out of a process, I can't help you. Because it takes that methodical process just as much as it takes getting zapped in a meeting somewhere. And our tribe has been known to love the zapping. We'll drive 1,000 miles to get zapped, to watch Benny Hinn fly out the window. We would walk across the street to study the book of Romans. I'm just trying to be I'm trying to do like my mentor. I'm trying to be right. So I dream of a church where fellowship is an expression of God's love demonstrated in life-giving relationships. That's the sentence. What I normally start them with is just put down some words. Start with words. I dream of a church where evangelism is. I dream of a church where worship is. I dream of a church. So you can understand how that feels. Take a few moments and just turn around at your table and do what we call dreamscaping. Now, if you'll turn over, we've got examples, but we give you a sheet that you can actually take some time and you can write some words down. Now, we're not going to ask you to complete everything because that's not our job here. You're not the cohort, but you are somebody who needs to understand what's going on, and maybe you'll need training or you need to teach somebody how to do this. So the more you can experience, the more you'll understand what it feels like for them to go through. So you see some examples. Now, what we normally do after we get the words established, we'll ask them to write a sentence describing that, and that'll be used later when we get ready to build our strategic plans. So take a moment, take all 5 functions. You have a worksheet, and you can talk and collaborate if you want to. You can build your own church together, or you can build one individually. But take a few minutes and do I dream of a church? That's what we call dreamscaping.
You the sentence announcer or something?
I'm just asking. John Cole.
You think that Connect one would be easier for people to flesh out when they talk about? I do like, by the way, in putting the words on there.
That's what I'm putting words in.
Yeah, I do like being able to have parameters there and the kind of an idea of unspoken guardrails. I think that's huge because you start just throwing stuff out there and it can be way off.
Get way out to the left field.
And it really, and begin to, you start reining stuff in, that becomes a problem. I do like that.
Then you got to watch the worship about the style.
Right.
Because everybody wants certain. Their dreamscape would be Bill Gaither. That's going to make it.
Yeah.
I think we need to do more, whatever, right? And
Yeah.
I think we need to add more, whatever, and it becomes a problem. New opportunities. I know this sounds like an elementary question, but what is it you think about worship that is so number one priority of everybody's list, and at the same time that's so divisive? You think that's what it is?
Totally. I had Sunday. I had the Evangel University Symphonia with us.
Right?
They were there. There's 36 kids. They did a marvelous job. Same church, same people, same pastor, same everything. Had people come up and go, wow, no presence. Because we had violins,
Right.
horn. And other people were going, yeah, that was all right. It's all personality. People what they like. It's kind of like what somebody said earlier about what you were reared with.
True.
Affects your strategy now.
True.
What you were reared with, you know, I played in an orchestra, so I like orchestra. I brought them in. The guys that don't like that, they won't scream in guitars. That's old hat. That's long hair. We don't need that.
Right. That personality.
I think it too can be more of a show,
Yeah.
performance.
Right.
And everybody wants to keep up with what somebody else is doing.
Some people like the show and performance, but there's no spirituality.
Yeah.
I mean, there could be, but it becomes a show, so it's not.
Who was it he said about Kanye West? Who did he quote?
Holstein?
No, he said Kanye West was the stars going to the church, and the church would have the church putting over the stage for the star.
Right.
So he quoted somebody.
He quoted somebody. Say, who did he quote? You're right. He sure did.
But what you said.
But that's the point.
We're all trying to make a performance, and Kanye's going, well, let's get off the stage and get down to the...
to worship ministry, and everybody's trying to go to
He
what
quoted somebody.
Yeah, I remember that. But it does seem to be a priority, and I do think he's right. If you're, church people look for worship, as far as, to me, it seems, as much as anything, when they come to a church. Of course, we know other things too. But, just interesting, because I did see on our scale, I wrote down that worship was the highest thing, and the bottom was evangelism, and that's the way it is. So, it's just interesting.
Right.
Yeah, and then evangelism, it should be and of course, evangelism is always hard.
But I think our tendency and just our human nature, we make it more about me
That's
instead of thee and others.
Yep. That is correct.
And you're talking about that, they see what's done on TV, and then they think, well, we ought to do. Bring the lights down, let the smoke blow up.
Right.
It's just like with Facebook and all the comparison jazz is killing our young people.
It is.
Killing them. And some of them are killing themselves because of the comparison.
Sure.
I remember somebody else said that TV preachers are killing pastors because they're presenting now an edited version of what reality is. They don't see when Bishop Jake screws up, doesn't say his words right. Everything's an edited version.
Right. Yeah, we had a guy that's up in South Carolina. He was preaching, and he puts out his video and stuff, and he's good. But I know I watched one of his services, early service, his two services, his early service. I'm like, he sounded tired. He looked tired. He sounded confused almost. It's like he just messed up. His second service was perfect, on point, whatever. That's the second service is what was promoted. So you always see the highlight reel, instead of the weak moments.
Are you close to Greg?
Who's that now?
Greg Surratt.
Oh yeah, he's over in Mount Pleasant, Charleston. Yeah, he's close to us. Absolutely, he's close, man. I wish he was AG, man. I really wish.
Well, his dad was. He once was.
Yeah. He once was AG. It sure enough started. He was on staff at a church that was Assemblies in South Carolina. They pulled out. The church kind of pulled out and became independent. Seacoast was birthed out of that. And that's a great going church. The big art conference this year is at Seacoast. It's at Seacoast this year. Yeah. It's really awesome.
So how do we put in our dreamscape, we want good worship that's not star-based? Yeah. Poking holes in somebody.
Right. Well, that's a good question.
Because you know good well, if you're leading a church group, you're going to say, well, I want all acoustic worship.
Right.
I want a group with I don't want any worship team. I want a choir with robes. That's real worship.
That's real worship. I like the idea that when he put in there some of the words he used had nothing to do with style just as much as maybe trying to move people towards an authentic, spirit empowered, something that's moving towards kind of what the atmosphere is like spiritually. I think that's probably what we'd have to help people see. Because honestly, like you said, if we're sitting here and you got people on the church board or leaders, they're going to have all kind of things. And so being able to put it in a way that's like more of the spirit of it, how you get there, just helping lead people through that. That's the hard part. Now, have you done this yet? Have you done these things with the Texas, anywhere in Texas?
We don't.
That's right. You said you used in New Life or Real Life? Church Life.
The superintendent and our church life and development director, Robin Wayne Lee, and presented that. Everybody Rick really picked it up and ran with it.
And that's where we're at.
They engulfed it. That's it. And I tried to get a couple of guys to come with me. And our director of church planning and development, church ministry, said, Mike, come on, go.
My 6-ounce bladder's full again.
Put our camp in church life.
Apparently my 6-ounce bladder.
Is it similar to this and what it does? Is that Lee? Is that Lee that does that?
Yeah.
Dr. Lee?
I was telling somebody this morning, I said, McCarty.
Yeah.
He said, what do you think? Because they went to church life and now they're back with this. And I said, well, several things that made me, our superintendent told all the presidents, you will be at this, and you are going to be there. And when I went through the presentation, it was all presidents, so we were all cutting up, having a good time. And they told us we were a weird group because we were having too much fun. And it was a different presentation.
Yeah.
A lot of our guys have really, I enjoyed the material, I really did.
Right.
Like Randall said, this is more looser, more flexible, so
Yes.
you can make it for your church.
Right. Is Randall doing it for the district or doing it for his local church?
District. No, he's up for the local church now.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Where he moved
I didn't know that.
So what we would do, we would ask the teams to make sure that, of course, they get all of this handout material. Make sure you keep a file or folder and you keep this. We don't tell them everything that's going on, but we just say, be sure you keep all of this. I'll tell you how we might use it later. So we're going to take a short break because afternoons,
like we already did.
After the heat, so I'm going to let you walk around and
Need a break.
the comfort station. When you come back, Dr. McManus is coming, and we're actually going to teach
I do not.
how we teach them
Thank
to
you.
build a vision statement. The way we teach it. Obviously, there's other ways to do it, I guess. And I wouldn't argue with anybody, but that's the way we teach it. So take about 10 minutes and be back. So thank you.